Hello friends. For today's video, I wanted to go through a list of some young adult books that I actually think are better than some of the adult books that they often get compared to. I want to be clear that I'm not just talking about these young adult books are better than all adult books. It's more so that you'll see various videos like this, try that, or if you are typically a YA reader, here are some adult fantasy books that would be good transitions into that age range. And every now and then when I see those, I think, yeah, but I liked the young adult one more, and I wonder if people are going from young adult to adult, if they're going to be like, I don't like this as much, and it's actually going to deter them from picking up more adult fantasy. So in a way, it's kind of like I'm saying, if that is someone, if it's one of you and you've seen before that that's happened and you're like, yeah, that keeps happening to me and I don't like the adult ones as much, that's okay. They do whatever themes they're executing, whatever plot lines and character relationships and types of characters, whatever they're trying to depict, they do it incredibly well. And then sometimes, no matter how many books you read that are recommended to you, did you hear my dog? No matter how many times you try a book that's recommended to you that is supposed to be the adult counterpart, you just don't find that you like it as much. I also want to say that when I first started my channel, which was years ago, I found that it was much more of an issue the way that people looked down at young adult. And it could just be that I don't bother and I just don't pay attention to that kind of stuff now, or that it's gotten better. Maybe the optimistic side of me and naive side of me just wants to believe it's gotten better, but from what I have seen and what I can tell, I think people have gotten so much better at recognizing that young adult is an age range and that it is for young people. And so it's really important that the books that are in that section are suited to them, that are going to represent them, that are going to be able to reflect what life at that time is like. And sometimes life at that time is not like what adults are going through, and thus we're not maybe going to connect with the execution of certain things the same way as we would in adult works. Now, that doesn't mean that there can't be times that we as adults do like young adult, or that if you're young adult, you of course can like adult. We can all also like middle grade. There's going to be things that no matter what, they transcend the age range and they're just a good story and it doesn't really matter who it's for. But I do think that as a result of us having these age ranges and trying to determine what is for who and writing to them and marketing to them, every now and then we're just going to have some that are outside of the norm and actually fit our tastes differently. So I'm going to start with a newer one, meaning the adult book is newer. And I myself have compared these two books to one another a fair amount of times. And it's part of what kind of got me thinking about this topic is I've said I think that the other book is better or that I like it more. And that's what prompted this. So that the inspiration would be Strange the Dreamer and Last Tale of the Flower Bride. Both of these, while their plots aren't necessarily the same, the prose itself is very pretty, but very abstract and very purple. And I am typically not a fan of that style of writing because I usually don't want anything that puts distance between me and the characters in the story. As a character-driven reader, if you spend too much time describing the world, or if you spend too much time on something that isn't our characters, I'm just like, yeah, but like, can I get back over here, please? And sometimes the writing can be so extravagant and over the top that while it evokes beautiful imagery, I'm like, I don't care. I just want to get back to the story. I want to get back to this character. They're so interesting and fascinating. I just want to peel the layers apart of this story and get to the meat of it. And sometimes it feels like all that fluff is keeping me from this place. However, every now and then you get somebody who utilizes that form of writing to best represent their themes or to represent the characters themselves. In Last Tale of the Flower Bride, I think that the writing represented the themes well, where I think that I didn't get as much from this story as Strange the Dreamer, which is not to say I didn't like Last Tale of the Flower Bride, it's just Strange the Dreamer hits different for me, is that I didn't have that connection to those characters. Everything always kind of stayed in this abstract headspace, whereas Strange the Dreamer pulled me in, gutted me, and I felt so strongly for these characters. Both are somewhat romanticized and brutal at the same time, so I think both of them fit into that grim fairy tale feeling. But Strange the Dreamer, if I had to compare the two, it'd be the one that if somebody presented both of these and said, which one should I read? I might go with Strange the Dreamer before I'd go for Last Tale of the Flower Bride. Depends on the reader, of course, and what they're looking for in their writing, if they want a standalone or multiple books. But I definitely preferred Strange the Dreamer. After that, we have one that I feel like many people do not agree with me on. As somebody who enjoys adult fantasy, and some of my favorite books and series are adult fantasy, I just find that a lot of the circles that I'm in disagree with this. But you see so often people say, if you like heist stories and you like Six of Crows, then you have to try Lies of Locke Lamora. And I'm like, you don't have to. Both of them actually have moments that are kind of cheesy and a little cliche, honestly, in how the characters build relationships. But specifically, some of the friendship dynamics. I mean, the two main characters in Lies of Locke Lamora are known for being some of the closest of friends in fantasy. And then you see two of the characters from Six of Crows, and there's literally a scene in Crooked Kingdom, the second book, where these characters, there's so much history between them, there's so much unsaid between them, that it just turns into something where they have to get it out, and they start fighting physically. And you also see in Lies of Locke Lamora, this is a very specific example, by the way, but you see in Lies of Locke Lamora that in the past, because you do in both of these stories go into the past to better understand and know the characters, you see a scene where the two characters, they didn't get along at first, and then they fought, and now they're best of friends. And to me, it was executed in a very cliche way. I was like, this is like the most stereotypical way that two guys become friends. And in Crooked Kingdom, I mean, they didn't become friends as a result, but you do see the way that these two characters, they can't just talk it out, and they have to fight, and then they have that moment of clarity after that brings them closer. And it's, of course, a preference thing, but I just liked the way it was executed. Obviously, these scenes are not exactly the same, but it's just a small example of one of the specifics that between the two, beyond just heist stories. One of the specifics are these friendships and these relationships between characters, and I just found the best friend dynamic between the characters in Lies of Locke Lamora, I didn't care for it. I didn't think we saw enough of it. It didn't have the depth that I was wanting. That doesn't mean objectively there's no depth. It just means that it wasn't what I was hoping for. I also find the kind of trickster side of some of our characters, the master plan that you as the reader are just kind of, you're not going to know all the details, but you're going to see it all unfold later. And it has that Pirates of the Caribbean, which is a goofy series of movies, but there's that whole like, does he plan this all, or is he just making it up as he goes? And that feeling is common in a lot of heist stories and adventure stories. And you see that with Kaz, and you see that with Locke in Lies of Locke Lamora. And both of them every now and then have scenes that are kind of goofy and cheesy. But it's fun because it's part of the heist story. But the ones in Lies of Locke Lamora would go on. There's one in particular that goes on for so long, and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't need to see this whole thing. And it's kind of at a climactic moment, and it somewhat interrupts the pace so that we can be like, look at him being clever. And I'm like, I don't care. I was so ready. I'm like, I get it. Okay, I get that. I get what he's doing. I get the con. Can we move on, please? So there's little things. There's little things that irritated me about Lies of Locke Lamora. And in Six of Crows, I do think some of the dialogue is not the strongest. But what brings up Six of Crows for me and for a lot of people is the way that you really dive into the characters, their pasts, their motivations, and their mental health and trauma. And I just don't see that as much in Lies of Locke Lamora. So oddly, I actually think while there are plenty of cheesy moments in Six of Crows, that the heavier moments are what made it a little bit better for me. Not a little bit. I don't really like Lies of Locke Lamora, but it's what definitely tipped the scales in Six of Crows' favor. I feel people being like, no. Next up, Fourth Wing and Fireborn. Technically, Fourth Wing, the author considers new adult. So I just want to make that clear. But regardless, I just think Fireborn is so much better. Okay, so just take what I said at the very end of the last example of the more serious moments, the moments with a lot of depth are what really made it so much better for me. That in a nutshell. I didn't feel anything beyond surface level feelings for Fourth Wing. A lot of my feelings were amusement, even though it's not really funny. And just, yeah, it's just like, it's just pure fun. In my opinion, that book is just pure fun. It's not really concerned with having those slower, introspective, reflective moments. It's just race to the finish line from the beginning. The stakes are somewhat nonsensical. The world building, not necessarily world building, but the way in which the War College goes about things is absurd. And so it's just like, how can we create the highest of stakes, even if it doesn't make a whole lot of sense? And for me, Fireborn, it's commentary on forms of government, on class, on trauma, on power dynamics. I just think it does so many things well, and it has these nods to Greek classics and philosophers, and I just think it's so interesting. It's like if Plato's Republic was combined with dragons, and I'm like, that's great. And then Fourth Wing's like, yeah, but what if the bad boy had a dragon? Next up, we have An Enchantment of Ravens and A Court of Thorns and Roses. I don't actually think, beyond the synopsis, that the story is that similar. It sounds like the details for the main characters would make these stories exactly the same, but really they're not that alike. And sadly for An Enchantment of Ravens, what I think happened is that a lot of A Court of Thorns and Roses fans, and that's not to say that if you aren't one of the people that I'm talking about now, that you don't have a valid opinion or anything like that. And it's also not to say that the opinion I'm about to describe is not valid. But I think so often when we see comp titles, we go into it expecting it to be like the thing that it's being compared to, and when it's not, we're left disappointed and we're like, that wasn't what you promised me, and then it can negatively affect our opinions. And so I think that happened. I think people who like ACOTAR went into it and they're like, this is not the same. And also then the similarities bothered them because they're like, okay, this just feels like you took this concept and then you did something different, and I don't even think this different thing is as good, and also, how dare you use these similar things, when I really don't think the timing of when it was published and when it was written stuff, I don't think it was like Margaret Rogerson read A Court of Thorns and Roses and was like, yeah, but what if I made this a little bit sweeter? So, An Enchantment of Ravens, it is really sweet. It is really just like nice little fairy tale with the fae, and it was interesting to get to dive into more of how the fae behave and what they value, and the tie-ins of art, which is where the comparisons are. A lot of times our main character is a painter, Feyre likes to paint. The difference is Feyre likes to paint. The girl in Enchantment of Ravens, this is like her profession and her passion, and she's extremely skilled. She does this, she paints people for money. Feyre, it's like her escape, which is lovely and great, and maybe she's just as good as the character in An Enchantment of Ravens, but they both like to paint, which is where I feel like the similarities are with the characters, and then there's fae, and they go to the fae land. So I get that those similarities are there, but if I had to pick, I like An Enchantment of Ravens more. I just think it's a lovelier story, it's a sweeter story, it feels more like a fun fairy tale journey, and ACOTAR, I actually don't hate ACOTAR the way a lot of people do, but it just wasn't quite as good, in my opinion, as An Enchantment of Ravens. Anyway, that's it for some young adult stories that have some similarities to or have been compared to some adult fantasy stories, and I actually liked the young adult books more. And I would love to know, what are some examples of this happening where you actually also really liked the young adult book more than the adult that it was compared to? And then also, if you agree with some of the ones I mentioned, feel free to say, but of course, if you disagreed, feel free to let me know your thoughts as well. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.